Yeah, welcome to the Weege Show, brought to you by Honda and the CRF450R and 250R. See it in action this weekend with both the Lawrence brothers in the 450 class, Jo Shimoda on the CRF250R, Chaz Hymas on the East on the CRF250R. Makes winning look easy. And that once again becomes the topic of this edition of the Weege Show, not from San Francisco. I wasn't actually scheduled to go to this race anyway, and there wouldn't have been anything to show here on a Friday because press day has been canceled due to the threat of inclement weather, but I have some men on the ground out there, and they've told me the weather is actually quite nice, and the track is already covered. So I don't know if we're going to be in for an actual mutter like everyone thinks. I love getting the Tuesday morning weather report and people telling me they're going to be mud races, and then they turn out to not be mud races. So we might be safe this time. But even though I don't have bikes on the track to show, and I will be back in San Diego, by the way, and then in Anaheim too, I'm actually the play-by-play announcer for the actual races. That'll be cool. That's all right. It gives us time to discuss an important topic that we need to address head on, clearly, for the rest of 2024, if not for the next 8 years, 10 years. And that is the circle of life in racing. Last year we left Anaheim 1 and it was a jubilant celebration. Everyone's favorite, Eli Tomac, a living legend, someone who had been in our life for a long time. We all have stories of Tomac being amazing in beast mode, and we were there when it started. We remember him winning his first race. He's the old guy that still got it. There was no question when we left Anaheim that Eli Tomac is great, was great. That was a feel-good win all around. And I did some videos saying I thought the crowd at Anaheim 1 last year was maybe louder than I had ever heard it. It was a little different this time. I didn't even hear opening ceremonies because I had headphones on because I was hosting the pre-race show with Katie Osborne. But beyond that, this rise of Jett Lawrence, this is the circle of life and racing that we must address. Now I will step back to a time well before I was a journalist in this sport, and I was a fan like anybody else, and I had my biases. 1989 through 1993, probably the largest dynamic run of generations in the history of this sport. It's like 20 years passed in 4 years. 3 generations passed in 4 racing seasons. The beginning of 89, Rick Johnson and Jeff Ward were still the kings of the sport. Johnson then got hurt. Ward had some miles on the odometer, and that opened the door for the next generation, which was Jeff Stanton, Damon Bradshaw, and Jean-Michel Bayle. And though it feels like those guys were at each other's throats for years, it was really only 2.5 seasons. By the end of 92, Bayle retired to go road racing, and it looked like the door was open for more Stanton and Bradshaw. Unbelievable combat in 93. They took the Supercross championship down to the wire in 92, and we were all looking forward to more of that. And me even more so. Why? Because of their gear brand. Axo gear had gone from not even heard of to the pinnacle of the sport in a 10-year span. And man, did they not only have good-looking gear, but they were master marketers at the time. Their ads looked good. The gear looked good. They had an awesome new magazine coming out that we're producing called Inside Motocross, which was much slicker and glossier than any magazine we had ever seen. It really presented the sport in the professional way that we all wanted the sport to be seen in. They even had cool comic book style drawings of Bradshaw and Stanton, and somehow that tied into the gear, and they made comic book looking gear somehow look good. Axo could do no wrong. And with Stanton and Bradshaw at each other's throats and that pesky Frenchman out of there, we were in for an awesome 1993 season. And Stanton and Bradshaw completely got booted to the side by Jeremy McGrath by the 3rd race of the year. Bradshaw won round 2. He had the points lead. Seemed like things were going as expected. And by the end of 93, Bradshaw had retired and Stanton was on the downside. And Jeremy McGrath, no one even knew who the dude was 3 years earlier. Like when Johnson was on top in 89, no one knew who McGrath was. And now he was the king of the sport. It did not compute. It did not make sense. It was jarring for someone like me that had already mentally prepared myself for the Stanton-Bradshaw era. And I was really mad at the TV announcer at the time, Dave Despain, who is my favorite of all time. He is an all-time legend. And what makes Dave Despain great is that he just states the facts, man. And the facts were that Bradshaw and Stanton were fumbling and Jeremy McGrath was ascending. But oh, I did not want to hear it. So then I built in all sorts of excuses. The best I could come up with was McGrath, I feel like he hole shot like 13 or 14 out of the 18 rounds that year. If you just gave Bradshaw those starts, it didn't matter, man. Jeremy McGrath was just the man. And this would obviously be borne out over the next couple of years. And then lo and behold, what happens at the end of the McGrath run? Well, now he's winning so much. It'd be really nice to see some parity, someone that can take the battle to him. And we were so looking forward to who's next. Maybe it's Larocco if he can get the starts figured out. Maybe it's Ezra Lusk. Jeff Emmings getting in there even at times. It would actually be Ricky Carmichael who got it done, and that was not a surprise because Carmichael was obviously on the rise since his mini bike days as a prolific amateur and then 125 rider. And for 4 or 5 glorious weeks at the beginning of the 2001 season, we had this incredible McGrath versus Carmichael tilt duel battle. It was great until Carmichael started winning again and again and again. And now we were back at the same cycle we were in when McGrath was beating the legends 8 years earlier. Jeremy McGrath was supposed to win. Well, this didn't compute. This didn't make sense. And then Carmichael made a few missteps. He was booed heavily by the beginning of the 2002 season, and that was blamed on him wearing a crown and scepter at the US Open of Supercross at the end of 01. You can't wear a crown. Jeremy is the king of Supercross. And it was blamed on him switching to Honda, which was kind of the corporate-looking money bags team of the sport back then, and it looked like they just bought the champion. All of that did not go over well. But was it really just that? Or had people already made their minds up that they didn't like the fact that the kid had knocked off the king, and then later we went searching for evidence to back up the things we already did not like? And this cycle came around again. Carmichael then started dominating. There wasn't much parity. James Stewart could be the one to rescue us. Until the moment that he really started knocking on that door. And then the fans that were cheering everything James did in 04 weren't so friendly in 05, especially because Carmichael had already learned from being booed 4 and 5 years earlier and had really refined his game with the fans, the media, and everything else. Carmichael was the GOAT. Don't go chasing the GOAT. This is just a circle of racing. And now we bring up Jett Lawrence. Now, we do not live in a world of absolutes. I want to absolutely make that clear. But it sure feels that way, especially surrounding the opening round of the season, because we're all reading comments on YouTube or Instagram, message boards, and we tend to overread into 1 or 2 comments here and there. We think that's like a real scientifically backed focus group of what everyone thinks. Don't use the word everyone, and don't use the word no one. But every year we go into the opener saying, everyone's saying this guy is going to win, and no one is talking about this guy, and everyone thinks this is going to happen, and no one is thinking about this. Well, in reality, it's not everyone and no one. It's some people are saying this, and some people aren't saying that. And that's to say that there are a lot of Jett Lawrence fans. I mean, he has a VIP fan zone. He has a huge autograph line. He gets cheered during opening ceremonies. Jett Lawrence is popular. There's no doubt. But there's also, not everyone, there's also this tint of, And the reason I bring this up is because we have to separate the person from the position. Because I've seen this go around. Jeremy McGrath didn't do anything wrong in 1993, and Ricky Carmichael didn't do anything wrong in 2001. The only thing they did was start winning races, A, against your heroes, and B, so often that it was making the racing a little bit predictable, which are 2 things that all fans fear. So I think now we're starting to see some pushback already toward Jett Lawrence, already the same type of pushback that there was when others ascended into greatness. And it's pretty wild how that can happen. And yes, the riders do have some control over that. Carmichael shouldn't have worn the crown. He maybe... Well, I don't want to say shouldn't have switched to Honda because he continued to win races and made a lot of money there. I shouldn't say that he shouldn't have, but certainly there is some control that the riders have over their image. But I don't want everyone to think that every rider can control it completely. Some of it is just circumstantial. So there's definitely some, I'm tired of hearing about the Lawrence brothers. They're shoving them down our throats. We're hearing too much about them. And some of it might be by design, but a lot of it is just circumstances. Jett's winning a lot. The person that wins a lot gets talked about a lot. And when you win this much this early, you start getting talked about in comparison to luminaries. And if you're even beating some of the luminaries, that makes it even more jarring and even worse. I can tell you, after McGrath won 3 in a row, through rounds 3, 4, and 5 of 1993, if someone had said, ooh, he could go on to be the best Supercross rider ever, I would have puked. I would have said, Jeremy McGrath will never compete with the likes of Bob Hanna or Rick Johnson. Get out of here with that. Well, that would have been wrong. It's just jarring at the time of the transition. And although it seems like that person is getting talked about a lot, and that's true, a lot of times it's because the person is earning that talk. Now, is the promoter working extra hard to help promote the Lawrence brothers? Of course they are. But last year was a celebration of the greatness of Eli Tomac. It just wasn't so jarring when the graphic went up on the screen every weekend of the TV show saying, oh, he's closing in on Reed and Stewart and Carmichael, and he could become the second best all time. And where does that put Eli Tomac in history? It was an absolute Eli Tomac love fest. That's how all sports try to grow. And I think most people would agree that is the goal here. You promote your stars. Probably tired of hearing about Patrick Mahomes if you want to run that same parameter in the NFL, or you're probably tired, this is very past tense now, of hearing about Belichick and Brady. But let me tell you, I didn't want to hear it from Dave Despain in 1993 about how good McGrath was either. And I love Dave Despain, but I still didn't want to hear it. Now, there's a few other circumstances out there. Jett has always had a great group around him who have really embraced the marketing side of the sport, and for that they should be applauded, because we've had far too many champions in the past that only cared about winning on the track and didn't really care about the other stuff. Part of the reason that eventually Jeremy McGrath went on to do such great things for Supercross was that he wasn't just winning, but he was embracing the publicity side for the sport. And isn't it weird that while McGrath was probably running the longest streak of non-parity in Supercross history, the sport also grew massively during that same time. So although we say we want parity, sometimes it actually draws fans by not having it. Yeah, Jett has a great marketing team around him. These are really smart people doing really smart things. But that means you're going to hear about things more often, from VIP programs to donut sales. He's also the SMX champion, and the series definitely wants to promote their new championships. You're going to hear a lot about that. He just happens to be the champion of the new series. But mostly, he's just winning a lot. Like, barely been beaten. We can pick a few things, like some individual motos at Motocross of Nations, things like that. It's jarring that we have this stat saying he won his first 450 Supercross that he raced in. Yeah, you can say that SMX maybe was Supercross or Supercross-ish last year, or he has more 450 experience because of all the outdoors last year and all those things. But are you really mad about the stat? Are you really mad because you're just pushing back against Jett for the circle of racing for those same reasons? Ooh, is this going to get boring if he wins all the time? Ooh, is he going to take the guy that I already liked and beaten him? Is this what we're in for a long time? I do not have a crystal ball, and I don't want to predict the future. As I said last week, it looked like Ken Roczen was going to ascend to nearly unbeatable status in 2017, and he was out of the series by round 3. You never know in racing or sports. I'm not predicting the future. Except I can predict one thing. That if Jett Lawrence continues to win like this, there will be a time where someone challenges him, and not everybody, but some people, many people, will want to see Jett continue to win then. Because then he will be the one that is the established living legend who has been in our lives as an elite athlete and person and hero for a long time. And we don't want to see them go down. So be it Stanton and Bradshaw then, or McGrath, or Carmichael, or Eli Tomac now. The people that you're used to seeing winning, it makes sense when they keep on winning. But the transition always comes, and that's the circle of racing. It's not Jett's fault. He's just doing what he's supposed to do, which is trying to win both on the track and off.